academia fail to practice sustainable industrialization, it means numerous issues can arise, which include social inequality and continued environmental degradation. Given that industrial and commercial activities were disrupted by the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, and the Russia-Ukraine conflict across the world, it is only important for African countries to adopt sustainable industrialization for the benefit of member states and their people. Ladies and gentlemen, let me move to, as we look at the sustainable industrialization, we have heard probably this morning, this is what I'm having. Africa has been feeling the brunt of climate change at the time when the continent should be running behind industrialization. So we are now found in a dilemma where we need to produce for our people, but we will be using antiquated technologies. But we've got a mandate to feed our people and to create jobs. At the same time, we have to be mindful of the environment. So, with this dilemma, from the previous speaker, I have noted that industrialization is increasing worldwide. For example, in Zimbabwe, because population is increasing, our population has increased from 13.1 million to 15.2 million this year. 13.1 from 2012 and 15.2 this year. This shows that we need to produce more for our people. We need also to create jobs. Hence, even our industries have been on a drive to rejuvenate themselves, as shown by industry capacity utilization in our country, which had soared from 47% in 2020 to the current 66%. All this, what it shows is we need industry, private sector has to gear up in producing packaging. Hence, packaging has also increased, because when industrialization is increasing, the issue of packaging increases. Hence, the need now to look into how the various packaging materials will be disposed. So, greening our economy, green industrialization becomes key here. So we need to work together, private sector, governments, and development partners, so that we come up with our green economies. In terms of the African Development Agenda, ladies and gentlemen, shortage of infrastructure remain key, but I just want to highlight one thing here. Most of the infrastructure development projects that are taking place in Africa, they are using materials or finished products that will have been imported from elsewhere. Hence, this increases the carbon footprint in the production of those materials. So, it could be very wise as we prioritize our sectors for development, for greening the economy, we need to check which sectors have a potential for high demand for local use before we start exporting, because any development would start from charity begins at home. What we need to do is to produce, then we export. So in the case of the fertilizer industry, in the morning we discussed fertilizer industry. In Zimbabwe, we've got a place where we have enough, I think, raw materials for the production of our fertilizer. This is the phosphate rock. I think we have got enough phosphorus rock to start to do the production of fertilizer, the very first stage of our fertilizer value chain. So I'm saying it is very important to reduce the transportation of the various products that will increase footprint by producing these products locally. Then in terms of energy and power generation, I think this is one of the key sectors that could drive African economies and could be targeted for green industrialization. We have seen these products doing great wonders in our rural areas in line with rural industrialization, because as we industrialize, ladies and gentlemen, let's not forget our rural areas. Most of our African countries have got 70% of people living in rural areas doing their various activities. So the provision of green energy is very important, since this will facilitate the increase in job creation. It will also facilitate the various value addition activities that will take place, that will be carried out by our small to medium enterprises. Given that power is also important in the education sector, it is important in the health sector. Imagine when green energy is in the rural areas where a clinic has got vaccines, so they could be able to now to store vaccines. And these days when pupils are busy studying for their exams, schools and colleges will benefit a lot. So this is one of the areas that need to be targeted for green industrialization. However, all these areas that will be targeted, they require funding. And I'm sure domestic or internal resource mobilization will do a great deal. I have in mind the devolution agenda we have in Zimbabwe, where 5% of our revenue is targeted for devolution. And these funds, they are targeted to go to the local authorities. Since local authorities are the very people, they are the very organizations that are very close to the people, to the grassroots. And they are able to facilitate the development of these green technologies in terms of provision of water, provision of electricity, etc., etc. So in terms of adaptation of modern technology, this area, African countries could facilitate using the various natural endowments we have. Like we have got the lithium projects. It's very interesting to hear that. We also have in Zimbabwe lithium deposits. And these could be used to spear green technology development in the production of batteries, which can be supplied to the whole of Africa. So we need to scale up these value addition and beneficiation activities. As a recommendation, my recommendations are: number one, as we industrialize, let's have robust stakeholder engagements. In other words, this is in fulfillment of the fact that we should not leave anyone behind and no place behind. So robust engagement is very key. And like we have heard from the morning, prioritization of sectors for sustainable industrialization is key. We need to prioritize our areas in our various countries. In Zimbabwe, we have prioritized some of our value chains, where fertilizer is one of them. I'm glad to report that we have even started to work on the 5-year fertilizer value chain roadmap, well before even we had the Ukraine-Russian war. So we are running with this. We need also to scale up the various value addition activities and beneficiation activities that use our local raw materials in order to reduce the carbon footprint. And then finally, domestic or internal resource mobilization to fund the various green energy activities that will be undertaken. I thank you.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Dayford. Vamos chamar o Sr. Tich, a partir do Zimbábue, que é o representante da Unido no Zimbábue. Já está em linha?
Yes, I am online.
Ok, tenha a palavra.
Yes, thank you, colleagues. I'll try also to be brief. And I really want to appreciate, this invitation to kind of, contribute some ideas. As colleagues may recall that, the inclusive and sustainable industrial development agenda is the mandate of UNIDO as a specialized agency of the UN. And we really are very, very comfortable with this agenda of industrialization. And as you also are aware, and as my colleague Nema talked about, the SDG 9, it really focuses on those key issues of industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And I would recommend colleagues that, they need to take a look at the indicators which are included under that SDG 9, because we think that is going to be a game changer for the economic development of Africa and beyond. And also in the context of the African Union, UNIDO is working together with UNECA and also the African Development Bank and other institutions to support what they call the IDDA 3, the third industrial development decade for Africa. And you would note that, that agenda is also a mandate from the UN. And also we are trying by all means to align the industrial development agenda with the Africa Free Trade Area, which really has been to change a lot of things in Africa and also enable Africa to compete with the global powerhouse, economic powerhouse. I would like also to say, colleagues, that as UNIDO, we have an instrument which we support our member states in terms of industrialization. We have this instrument which we call Country Program for Inclusive and Sustainable Industrial Development. And you note that, when you talk about sustainability, there are three issues which we seek to address. One is to try to address the issues of climate change, the issues of social sustainability, and also issues of financial sustainability. Because for a business, it really makes sense to look at those three aspects when you consider issues of sustainability. And I also wanted to share with you, colleagues, that we have been implementing these country programs for inclusive and sustainable industrial development in many countries of Africa, including Mozambique, Zimbabwe, South Africa. Many of the countries in Africa, they have got those country programs. And we want to see these country programs continue making a dent in terms of our economic development agenda. And if I were to use an example, for example, if I look at the country program for inclusive and sustainable industrial development for Zimbabwe, it has 6 components, very key components, which include issues to do with the strategy and policy making support, issues to do with the value chains, technical quality infrastructure, and most importantly, component number 5 of the Zimbabwe country program for industrialization is what we call business responding to climate change. In other words, it's about a green industrialization strategy for Zimbabwe. And this, the green industrialization strategy of Zimbabwe is already also included in the Zimbabwe industrial policy. If you look at some of the activities which a government of Zimbabwe has agreed to push forward, green industry program is one of the areas which they really want to push the agenda forward. And under the green industry program, you will note that, from the onset, when we supported the government of Zimbabwe to come up with this strategy, we involved the private sector. We involved the private sector business association, which is called the Business Council for Sustainable Development Zimbabwe. This is a very old and very active, member of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is based in Geneva. So for us, the Green Industry Program itself is like a tripartite PPP arrangement where you've got the government, the private sector, and UNIDO and other development partners supporting the greening agenda in Zimbabwe. And you will see that, if you take a closer look at this green industry program, it has got about 3 key thematic areas. One, we try to focus on strategy and policy making agenda. Secondly, we are looking at, pilots, which we think they may have, greater impact in terms of industrialization of Zimbabwe from a green point of view. And the last part of that green industry program is on the financing. As an economist, I believe that, there's no way Africa is going to industrialize if they depend on grants from the development partners. Industrialization is a financing, is an investment agenda. And that should be very clear, even if you look, historically, from what happened in Asia and what happened in China, they really utilized the domestic resources to leverage, global resources to push their industrial development agenda. So what I'm saying here, that whatever we do in terms of greening industry or supporting the industrialization agenda itself, we should be conscious that no amount of donor money is going to push that agenda forward. All we need to depend on our little domestic resources and then try to leverage them to attract more foreign direct investments. Let me, before I come to the recommendations, let me just also make a comment on the issue of energy. Energy. I think this is a big issue, and I think there's a kind of a conceptual problem, the way we look at energy in Africa. We look at energy as a utility, whilst the rest of the world look at energy as an industrial product. Even if you look at the ISIC Revision 4 classification of industrial products, you see there's a classification of energy and water as an industrial product. That change of mindset, I think it would really enable us to move forward. Specifically, as we try to push, the issues of renewable energy, energy efficiency, which are very key, under the green industry program of any country, globally. When I talk about the issues of renewable energy, I think we should also have a mindset change whereby we need to encourage and support our domestic industries to start producing, components which really, add the value to the industrialization agenda. I'm happy that, Nema was talking about issues of lithium batteries. That is a very key, intervention. And it would be good if African, countries which have got those lithium deposits, then you can look and work together around that, that regional value chain with the Zambia, DRC, maybe Zimbabwe included, to see what is that you can do to make a difference and compete in that, global value chain of lithium batteries. Same thing with solar, Why should we continue importing, solar panels from Asia, from China, when you can easily, import just the cells and then produce the panels in Africa? Yeah? The same thing about the water geysers, the rooftop ones. We are importing these bulk, drums, from China, from India, anywhere else. Whilst you can support our local industries to produce those, water geysers, in Africa or in any particular country. That way, we are really supporting the industrialization agenda from a greening perspective. Let me come to my recommendations, which are not that many. The first recommendation is that I think we need to kind of, ensure that, when we come up with our industrialization strategy at a country level, the green industry program or green industry strategy is one of the key components, like what Zimbabwe has done. The second issue, we also need to pay attention to issues of technology and innovation. And we can only drive that issue of technology innovation if we really support our research institutions, which would include, the innovation hubs, the technical universities, who are really contributing very minimal to our industrial development agenda. Why should it be like that in this age, of technology? Our professors, our students, those who are undertaking doctoral degree studies, they should be coming up, with some of these innovations, and so that we can make a difference. And also, I think, the issues of technical quality infrastructure, which relates to international standards, I think it's an area which we need to pay particular attention as we try to move the industrial development agenda. Lastly, but not least, let me re-emphasize again, colleagues, that there's no donor, there's no Western country which is going to give you money to industrialize so that you can compete with them down the line. We need to use the little resources which we have in Africa to industrialize, and then use those little resources to leverage more resources from the African Development Bank, Import-Export Bank, Development Bank of Southern Africa, and then before we start thinking about attracting foreign direct investment. Because foreign direct investment will only come in when they see that, the business in Africa are very serious about the industrial development agenda, and they are doing something about it. Thank you so much.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Tich. Temos mais alguém, equipa técnica? O Sr. Mauá está aí, em linha? A equipa técnica? Bom, penso que não temos mais ninguém. Está. Senhor Mauá, está a nos ouvir?
Yes, I can hear you, Chair.
Ok, muito obrigado. Então tenha a palavra.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Can I confirm if my screen is visible?
É visível. Estamos a ver.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, distinguished delegates. Thank you very much for inviting us to be part of this meeting, and as requested, we will try to contribute our part. And I would like to thank all the colleagues who came before me because they have cleared a lot of ground. What I'll be bringing in from the UNCTAD ASCUDA program perspective is more on the implementation part of things. I think all along we have had a number of policy positions, but what we are going to be seeing here is what UNCTAD is doing in the region and around the world in terms of implementing certain initiatives that can contribute to industrialization in Africa. My name is Hauhelo Mawana. I am based in Zambia. We have a regional office for the ASCUDA program, which is located in the COMESA Secretariat. So that's where we are working, and we have a project there under the Trade Facilitation Program. So in my discussion, I will look at the context of what the work we are doing as UNCTAD and how far we are represented across Africa. As well, we'll look at the highlights of certain tools that we have developed, like single windows, and then we are now setting up a regional support center for customs automation in the COMESA region. So this will be the context, but at the end of the day, we'll also look at how this can contribute towards industrialization. So as already indicated, I think the other colleague from UNCTAD indicated that we are there for the developing countries. And in the case of the UNCTAD ASCUDA program, you'll find that almost all our initiatives are centered around trade facilitation. We believe that when someone said trade is the engine for development or for economic growth, they really saw that you can industrialize, but industries will need to produce products for certain markets, and those markets may not be all local, so they need to take the goods to the markets. Manufacturers will also need to bring in materials and export their products at the end of the day, so trade facilitation becomes a key engine to drive industrialization as we allow inputs to come into the country, as we allow exports to leave the country. The mandate for UNCTAD comes from the Bridgetown Covenant, where in October last year, we had a renewed mandate where member states says UNCTAD should continue to cooperate with member states in implementing the automated systems for customs data, which is ASICUDA. We are, of course, involved in all those areas like knowledge sharing, training, capacity building, technologies, and all other areas in trade logistics. So I'll be highlighting what we are doing in the region and which is meant to contribute to industrialization in the region. I will not focus much on our mission, vision, and values, because these we can skip. In terms of our footprints across the world, UNCTAD is now, the ASCUDA program in particular, is now 40 years in existence. This is a program that started in the early 80s, and it was actually requested by an African country. Then it started being developed as an automated system for customs purposes. So here we have over 100 people which are spread around the country, specifically for the ASCUDA program. And we find ASCUDA is a program that is used in more than 100 countries around the world. So we work with a lot of partners. We work with the World Banks, the European Union, TIMIA in the East Africa, ADB, and a number of countries that contribute to our work. So if we look at the ASICUDA, remember ASICUDA is a system for customs purposes, because customs cannot remain manual when the rest of the world is going digital. So customs has had to employ digital tools to process declarations. So we have ASICUDA in AU member states. You'll find that as of 9 October 2022, there were 44 AU member states that are now AFCFTA state parties. We note that of those 44, 36 countries are using ASICUDA as their customs system. So you can see there is some commonality across the continent that may spare trade facilitation, as countries can easily agree on various tools to facilitate trade. So that's about 82% of the current AFCFTA state parties. The East and Southern African region, which is the office based in Zambia, is actually represented there by the regional coordinator, Mr. Fernando Siles. He could not be with us here. So you'll find that it covers 24 countries. Of course, some of them are in West Africa, but they were put together because of the clustering that was done for this program. Out of these 24 countries, 2/3 of the countries already use ASICUDA. And because of that common utilization of this system for customs processing, all the trade at the end of the day, negotiations will be done, policy positions will be taken, legal instruments will be put in place. But what matters to the business person is for the goods to cross the border and get to the factory, for the product to leave the factory and get to the customer facilitated across the borders. And that's where our program comes in. I would like to now look at what we are doing at the moment. We are upgrading the ASICUDA World system to the latest version, which is version 4.33, and we are working on customs-oriented enhancements. We have interconnectivity for single windows, and we are partnering government agencies, systems for specific things that they want. If a country wants to control certain products and they want the system to be developed for that, we can do that. So this is the main activity on the customs automated system side of things, where we are trying to say member states should use the latest technology that can facilitate trade. This is an online system which is 100% paperless, depending on the users, of course, but you can actually do away with all the paperwork and work online from submitting the declarations through to processing all the controls, including manufacturing, monitoring the manufacturing processes. They can be controlled through this customs system, where customs has got control over some manufacturers. Then we also have some single window systems, and we are using this to illustrate that UNCTAD ASICUDA program is now spread across all the logistics area. The level 1 in a single window is to have a paperless customs. This is where we are with our ASICUDA World. It is now a paperless system. The next level, which is level 2, is to embark on other government agencies controlling their imports and exports through the customs system, which is like a coordinated border management level. We already have that going on. The next level will be to include the shipping industry, the airlines, the ports, and everyone else. That is still possible. Then we can move on and have a scenario where now the traders, the banks, and everyone else can interact through a single window. This now becomes a national single window where it has gone beyond the government agencies. And finally, you can think of a regional single window where the countries can exchange instruments through their single windows across the region to enhance trade facilitation and harmonize a lot of things. So we are using this to show that the ASICUDA program is now involved through level 1 through to level 5, and therefore digitalization for industrialization is possible, because when we eliminate paperwork, when we harmonize all these instruments and introduce more e-solutions, we should be accelerating the receipt of materials and dispatch of exports. In terms of the single windows in Africa, we have done single windows in Rwanda, in Uganda, in Comoros, and Zimbabwe is at the inception stage of their single window. This will allow the various agencies, like you see in Rwanda and Uganda, more than 20 government agencies are now interacting through a single window. That reduces the cost of doing business for the businesses because they just lodge one request in one window and all the government agencies will deal with it. So this is a way of digitalizing which can be used to enhance efficiency in the countries. In East Africa, you can see the numbers speak for themselves. Rwanda and Uganda, they've even gone to use this single window system to exchange the e-certificates of origin. You cannot have a free trade area without a certificate of origin system that guarantees that the goods qualify for preference. And they've been using it beyond East Africa and COMESA. They've used it in a number of other countries, including countries outside Africa. So we're just illustrating this to say, these are some of the digitalization programs that we have that countries can embark on and reduce the cost of doing business by easing the way people work. At the moment, we are based in Zambia. We are putting together a customs automation regional support center. This center is part of the trade facilitation program for COMESA, sponsored by the EU under the EDF 11, and we were asked to put together this regional support center. What will the center do? It will enable COMESA Secretariat to provide technical support to member states in sustaining and further enhancing the customs automated systems, including developing harmonized trade facilitation tools and procedures. So we have already received 3 files from 3 member states, and we are waiting for the Secretary to put the servers together. When we pilot this program, we will be also bringing in the experts from the member states to work with us so that there is that capacity building that is built in, as well as ownership by the region. And then we also have developed a COMESA regional trade information portal. It has got a trade facilitation index and an e-tariff built in it. What is this regional trade information portal? It is a consolidation of trade information portals from the member states. We have put together the trade information portals from Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi, and made it appear on one platform as a regional portal. Then in that, we built in a trade facilitation index where you can compare the procedures in country 1 versus country 2, and you see that it's expensive to do business in country 1 as compared to country 2. That will help the countries to benchmark and improve their procedures. Then the tariff tool, which was done for the Rwanda Revenue Authority, this is a real-time duty calculator where you can put your figures into the system. It will calculate all the customs duties, VAT, and other fees that are applicable to that importation into Rwanda. Then the details we give there, you can access that portal using those universal access rights that we have created. Then we have also done the interconnectivity platform system. This is for data exchange. Member states can actually exchange trade facilitation tools like certificates of origin, permits, or guarantees, whatever they want to exchange. It will eliminate paper-based trade procedures. It will improve capacities for them to facilitate trade. It ingrains transparency and confidentiality in regional trade data. It reinforces this capability to capture appropriate statistics for trade. And the COMESA Secretariat, in this instance, will be allowed to monitor what is being exchanged among the member states without reading the exact content. So it's like they will only be able to see the logs. So many documents went from country A to country B, but they won't be able to access the information there for confidentiality purposes. This is a platform that is ready for piloting, and we are just waiting for COMESA to give us all the piloting countries to come forward. And it can work with any system, whether it's in single window, certificate of origin system. The ASCUDA system is one system which is most flexible at the moment because countries are given source codes so they can actually play around with the system and be able to do what they're doing. Linking this to the AFCFTA, you can imagine 44 countries trying to share hard copy certificates of origin with sample signatures, with sample date stamps and all that. It will be quite chaotic. So we recommend that such platforms be developed at AFCFTA level so that we use e-solutions as opposed to basing on paper. What I've just explained in terms of the COMESA interconnectivity platform system is just country A and country B going through the COMESA Secretariat. We noted that at the moment, countries have bilateral data exchange arrangements, but the secretariats do not get that information. So putting the secretariat at the center there is meant to enable them to monitor how the FTA is being utilized. And finally, the issue of sustainability, we know that when the project is ongoing, there will be experts from UNCTAD, but what will happen after the projects are done? So we are also engaged in capacity building. We have since March conducted 4 courses. The fifth one is ending this Friday. Then starting mid-November, we are doing the last French course. We will be arranging other courses in Arabic in partnership with other countries that are handling more Arabic countries. So this is the capacity building component where we say, by the time we leave the project, the member states should have at least 3 IT people, which is the technical side, and at least 3 functional people, which is the customs business side, who are capable to run with all these outputs. So in terms of our recommendations, we will recommend that customs authorities recognize that they are a very major player in terms of industrialization in our economies, because the more the goods remain at the border, because there are delays at the border, the less productivity, the less competitiveness our economies will be. So to speed up processes, we recommend that they adopt the automated solutions. As we have indicated, we have got a full range of solutions that can be used. Those who are using other systems other than Asikuda, you'll find that they can also benchmark and have equal capabilities on those, on their systems. Then for sustainability, we again say, while we are still there, countries must make sure that they learn from the expertise in UNCTAD, and at the end of the day, digitalization should be a major factor for trade facilitation, because industrialization alone will not work if inputs, inward logistics and outward logistics are slowed down at the borders. So we recommend that customs fully digitalizes, not only customs, but all the border agencies, including those we refer to as behind the border agencies. They all need to automate, and the best way to automate is to move into a single window, and we all operate from the same platform. We thank you, Chair, for your time, and thank you to the delegates for their attention.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Mauawa. Espero que todos estejam em linha. Vamos iniciar a fase de colocação de questões. Eu, desde manhã, não coloquei nenhuma questão. Vou começar mesmo a colocar algumas questões aqui para a Sra. Teresa. A primeira questão é quais as abordagens integradas são necessárias para entender as sinergias e compensações entre as ações setoriais com relação à digitalização e infraestrutura, para que os efeitos colaterais negativos possam ser minimizados, enquanto as oportunidades para criar benefícios de desenvolvimento sustentável positivos e mais amplos possam ser aprimorados. Para a Sra. Mauawa, como é que as tecnologias podem ajudar a melhorar a eficiência dos processos industriais, manufatureiros e agrícola na África para colocar o continente no caminho para o desenvolvimento sustentável? Para o Sr. Tich, onde estão as fontes potenciais de financiamento para o desenvolvimento da infraestrutura sustentável e como os Estados-membros podem alavancar parcerias para garantir esses recursos? De novo, para a Sra. Mauawa, como a digitalização pode ser melhor utilizada para apoiar a industrialização verde na região? Para o Sr. Dayford, tem mais uma questão também aqui. Em quais indústrias ou setores os recursos de adaptação futuros precisam ser focados? Que benefícios específicos poderiam ser acumulados por meio de tal concentração de recursos de adaptação. A última questão ainda para a senhora Tish. Para contribuir com a iniciativa da industrialização verde, o que precisa ser feito para transformar a maneira como os Estados-membros melhoram o acesso à energia, a relação custo-benefício e a eficiência? Bom, não são obrigados a responder todas as questões, mas também se não responderam não vou ficar satisfeito. Então íamos começar com a senhora Teresa. Senhora Teresa, está em linha?
Estou em linha, mas não consigo ligar a câmara. Tem que ser a organização.
Ok. A equipa técnica pode ligar a câmara, faz favor?
Se não, posso começar a responder, de qualquer forma.
Sim, vamos ganhar tempo. Faz favor.
Muito obrigada pela pergunta. Eu vou continuar em inglês para facilitar. Então, ok. Não consigo mesmo ligar a câmera. Não, queria dizer que sorry. I wanted to try to reply saying that when I mentioned about holistic approach, I realized that the topic of the panel combines a number of challenging, a number of current and important challenges, but at the same time, somehow conflicting challenges. For instance, we know very well that the development of economic activities, namely of industries, often has a negative impact in the environment and in climate change. So there's also always some tension between what I would call industrial policy or economic policy, sector-specific driven, and the environmental policy. So compromises need to be achieved, and this is also why we recommend this holistic approach, because it is the only way to reach a balance, to strike a balance that is able to ensure that the goals of industrialization are met while minimizing the negative impact on environment. That's why, for instance, I mentioned the current technical cooperation project that we have on pollution that I believe is very interesting. And let me also add that we are working on identifying substitutes for plastics, which is actually quite an interesting and even exciting area of research. And we do believe that several developing countries can have natural advantages, but of course these need to be identified and explored, and in some cases maybe transformed or adjusted. So talking about, again, the holistic approach, it is also very important that countries, of course, are able to identify its strengths and, well, in a way, its areas for improvement. And this is also why we believe that these diagnoses, as the colleague from UNIDO was talking about, are extremely important. For instance, let me say that either in the area of environment, we have been doing exercises that are called national green exports reviews, trying to how to improve their export capacity through, let's say, greener products. And this has been very successful in a number of countries. So again, we believe that this diagnosis, working in the field with businesses, with business representatives, of course, with government representatives, with other relevant stakeholders, really understanding what are the opportunities, what are the constraints, is extremely important. Another type of diagnosis I would like to mention is something that concerns the potential of e-commerce and digital economy. So we do a number of diagnoses that allow countries to identify the needs for a legal or regulatory framework that will enable businesses to understand what they can do, what they cannot do, that will bring predictability and stability even for foreign investors. So we think that of course, that's why I mentioned public policies. But then, of course, we know that very concrete policy measures, namely trade measures, should be considered. I mentioned those that are more important as far as market access. We do think that, and I mentioned this already, the discussions, even though not yet negotiations in the premises of WTO on these environmental goods and services are of great importance in order to allow the potential of green exports by developing countries. But of course, this will probably need some negotiation in order for the categories of environmental goods and services that are allowed sometimes some sort of support to be still able to enter markets, new markets. That is also something that is extremely important. I did not mention this, but this is one of my areas, of course, competition policy. This is to say, it is very important that the efforts that countries are doing in reducing tariffs and eliminating non-tariff measures are not replaced by private arrangements between businesses, often big companies or even multinationals that restrict prices, that establish quotas for production, that don't allow consumers in the market and small businesses to flourish and to have business opportunities. So, and again, all of this in general terms, but always having in consideration the specific needs of the most vulnerable, and that will encompass individual entrepreneurs, family businesses, micro and small and medium-sized companies, and from the consumer side, vulnerable groups of consumers, the elderly, those who live in remote locations that may not have access to any sort of infrastructure. And we have mentioned already key, I would say, key utilities such as energy, but also because of energy also that are not really able to make the most out of the opportunities offered by the digital economy. And I would end just with, of course, from UNCTAD, our motto is prosperity for all. And of course, we are very committed with the idea, with the principle that of leaving no one behind, the importance of using regional cooperation, namely along the lines of regional economic organizations. That's why I mentioned AFCFTA at the continental level, but of course, for instance, SADC is extremely important and active also in your part of the world, in your part of the continent. But so using regional cooperation and regional integration really to get leverage, to improve scale, to complement resources, to launch joint studies and identify priorities, and of course, and also reach out and request the assistance and the cooperation of international organizations such as my own. Of course, all the United Nations organizations are there to support you. Thank you very much.
Obrigado, senhora Teresa. Vamos passar agora a palavra para o senhor Mauawa. Senhor Mauawa, faz favor, tenha a palavra.
Thank you, Chair, and let me respond to this one question on how digital technology can better utilize to support green industrialization. As I indicated earlier on, industrialization is meant to produce goods. Industries have to have manufacturers. These manufacturers would need to have inbound logistics to bring their inputs. They have to do their processing and take out their products. So in our case, we recommend that countries have to look at all the opportunities they have to digitalize their processes. We know, especially after the Trade Facilitation Agreement came into force, a number of technical assistances are availed to countries if countries can look at consolidating all these technical assistance to ensure that at the end of the day, their digitalization programs move from zero to the end without leaving any gaps in between. So that at the end of the day, it is about having digitalization to facilitate industries and manufacturers as they get their goods moving faster across the borders. I'm sure most of you have been across our borders. I've been a customs officer for all my life, and I know the amount of pressure that industries have when goods are delayed at the border. So we need to say digitalization should be used to ease the delays at the borders and ensure that industries manufacture faster. Instead of holding a lot of materials, they can maybe operate more like just in time to move their inputs, process, and move the outputs without a lot of inventories to hold on. Thank you, Chair.
Mawawa, Senhor Tich, pode tomar a palavra.
Thank you, colleagues. Before I provide a response to those two questions, I wanted also to clarify one issue which I forgot to clarify, that industrial policy making is a whole of government agenda. It's not an agenda only for the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. It goes beyond that. It's different from a manufacturing sector policy. I think if you understand that perspective, I think it really makes a big difference for this agenda going forward. But in terms of the sources for sustainable industrialization, I think, one of the emerging best practices out of Asia and China is that, when you come up with an industrial policy, it should be a key component of the national development strategy. If you were to look at this in terms of, in Zimbabwe, I think they have done a very good, arrangement whereby, the industrial policy agenda is included in one of the national pillars, which is called the value addition and structural transformation. Once you do that, it means that, government would then have to allocate resources from its national budget on an annual basis and for a reasonable period of time. And also that government would then have to come in and support specific institutions which support the industrial development agenda. Zimbabwe and in South Africa, they have what they call the industrial development corporations. Those are the instruments which are very key in terms of pushing and financing the industrial development agenda forward. And also, I think, issues to do with the incentives, whether they are implemented by the tax or the revenue authorities, I think, they make a big difference. We should not always have, use the stick approach to make sure that the industry is complying, but we need to also to incentivize them so that they can, respond and contribute to the industrial development agenda. As it relates to the climate change agenda, especially as we talk about sustainability, there are already some global facilities. The Global Environment Facility, GEF, the Green Climate Fund, and other green funds which are operating, globally. Those are very key sources of investment for industry. And I think that, we need kind of, to depart from a position whereby when we look at the GCF in the region, we only think about that they should be supporting environmental projects. GCF should be supporting industry to go green. And I don't understand why we are not doing it here in Africa, but elsewhere they are doing that, and I think it will make a big difference. In terms of also renewable energy and energy efficiency, I think it has proven that, you could save a lot of, resources if a company goes towards, use of renewable energy or energy efficiency. So those savings from individual companies, I think they can also contribute to the to financing, energy initiatives. Of course, there are several other, private investments, whether they are trying to target, lithium battery manufacturing, or you can also try to maybe, link with the Import-Export Bank of Africa. I'm aware that they are also in Zimbabwe. They are supporting, the fertilizer company to try to use hydrogen instead of, using an antiquated system which they have been using for the past, 50, 40 years. I also maybe end by saying that, if you look at the Green Industry Program of Zimbabwe, in terms of grant funding, the budget is about $15 million US. But in terms of the investments which we think we can leverage, if we get that $15 million US grant funding, it's about $250 million US, only for the Green Industry Program in Zimbabwe, using $15 million US grants to leverage $250 million investments. There's nowhere, else where you can see such a great impact as you try to support the industrial development agenda. Thank you so much.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Tich. Sr. Dayford, tem a palavra.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me attempt to answer some your question. Right, in terms of priority, remember, we are all here right now to discuss issues that are to do with changing the lives of the people back home in our member states. So what is important here is we really need to prioritize high impact areas. In high impact areas, we get them after consulting. We have constituencies to consult, that is the private sector, who are the implementers of the various projects and programs. The government, who are the facilitators of the various policies that will have been agreed. And the development partners we've seen, they are playing a big role in making sure these projects are also implemented. So these various subsectors will have an impact also even through exports. Because whatever we are going to produce, whatever product, if we satisfy the local market, it will eventually go to the next border. So these are the areas where we say we should focus, because once we export, we will also increase the revenue in terms of foreign currency generation, which will be very useful to import or to acquire the various machineries that are used in the production process, in industrialization process, the various medicines, etc., etc. So in terms of adaptation of new technology, in mind, I have the issue of skills training. Whenever we are coming up with the various policy documents, we really need to have at the back of our mind the section for skills training, and the youth comes into play again. We really need to incorporate them, since they are very young people who are very talented. They've got minds that think far much ahead of almost all of us. So all our strategies should be very inclusive to take on board all the various issues that are very important in coming up with our policies. I thank you.
Obrigado, senhor Dayford. Bom, não vou passar a palavra para a plateia, para os delegados, porque já estamos na hora, ou seja, já passamos o tempo necessário. Mas queria agradecer a vossa paciência pelo fato de terem acompanhado atentamente as questões e vamos dar nota máxima aos nossos oradores. Uma salva de palmas. Para finalizar, gostaria mais uma vez de agradecer esta oportunidade que dão ao nosso país, a Moçambique, como presidente da mesa, mas também queria, por via disso, felicitar Botsuana como vice-presidente e Angola como o relator. Acho que merecemos uma salva de palmas também.
Yes.
Hoje nós não conseguimos de facto controlar o tempo. Vamos tentar ver isso amanhã. Vamos pedir alguma rigorosidade, pontualidade na chegada. Vamos começar pontualmente às 8 horas da manhã, para ver se conseguimos ganhar o tempo. Vou passar a palavra. Bom, com essas palavras, considero já encerrada a sessão para hoje. E vou pedir para o nosso mestre de cerimônia dar algumas orientações para o dia da manhã. Tenha a palavra, mestre de cerimônia.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Presidente. Para amanhã, prevemos entrar às 8h30 e, conforme o Sr. Presidente recomendava, queremos fazer maior aproveitamento do tempo. Em termos de agenda, já temos domínio concreto das matérias que vamos abordar e recomendamos que estejamos preparados para trazer aqui o conhecimento que temos sobre estas matérias e o contributo necessário e esperado. Quero agradecer a todos pela presença e permitam-me também desejar bom repouso, mas antes comunicar que temos um café no nosso local dos cafés. Vamos tomar e voltamos para este lugar amanhã de manhã. Muito obrigado.
Recording stopped.